Hi, everybody. I'm Tyler. Good to see some friendly faces and new faces. I'm from the IEA, and my primary job at the IEA is to work on energy efficiency markets and business models and all of that kind of thing with our member countries. I'm the project manager and principal author of the Energy Efficiency Market Report, which Peter was just talking about. But I read the program for the day. And I have kind of a canned market report kind of spiel, but I thought it would be a bit more relevant to talk about, in the post-COP21 days, about the role of energy efficiency in the climate. So I'm just going to slightly shift what we've done before. So with that said, let's get started. Basically, I don't know if people know much about mountain climbing. I'm not an expert mountain climber, but as a Canadian, I kind of feel like I know something about that. At least many of my friends do. And one of the most difficult things in mountain climbing, or one of the most dangerous things, I should say, is actually climbing down the mountain, not up the mountain. And a lot of people die actually on the descent than going up because we tend not to plan the descent as well. We get very excited going up. So there basically is a depiction of long-term global net greenhouse gas emissions. And the challenge that we're going to face going forward based on the IEA scenarios is that getting up is optional, but getting down basically is mandatory. And to do that, we need to get down to levels not seen since the 1950s globally. And essentially, we need to decarbonize at a rate faster than what we've carbonized over the past 50 years. We need to do that all the while the global world is developing, or the developing world is continuing to develop, I should say, while our energy infrastructure and systems are maintained and strengthened, while global climate change itself will have impacts on the nature of our energy system and the type of energy services that we demand. And all the while, we've got to keep the lights on, and we've got to keep people happy, employed, and all that kind of thing. I didn't come up with this saying, but I really like it. The metaphor basically is to transition to the clean energy future, where essentially we need to rebuild a jetliner mid-flight. And that's the challenge. So essentially to do that, sorry, just going back, this green line here essentially implies an energy transition unlike anything we've ever seen before. So just a couple notes on energy transitions, and it wouldn't be the IEA if we didn't have broad, sweeping generalizations for you about global energy trends. So here's a representation of two energy transitions that have happened in the previous 200 years. Arguably, these are the only two energy transitions that have happened. One is from biomass or wood to coal, and the next is from coal to oil and natural gas. Those take couple generations to complete. So starting from now to 2050, we're basically, the clock is ticking on the timer. Interesting to note, you're not so smart if you say the energy transition is happening when you're right here on the development schedule. You're pretty smart if you can identify the asymptote before it really starts to bend. And people were saying that, in the 1970s, it looked like maybe we were on the verge of another energy transition with the scale out of nuclear and renewables. Maybe that would have solved the crisis for us, but it ends up in turn that the rest of the world just went into stasis, or the energy system, in terms of the fuel share, went into stasis, and that the third energy transition did not happen. So what's missing? What I want to just put in your mind today is that the third energy transition, or the sustainable energy transition, is really fundamentally about actually an energy efficiency transition. And the energy transition will be more about how we use energy than how we produce it. I actually kind of lied when I said that there wasn't an energy transition that happened after 1970. As you can see here, what the transition was a rapid expansion of the entire energy system. Although the shares of fuels remain the same, what we saw was a significant expansion of that system itself. The expansion was so large that basically in 1900, global primary fuel supply was about 20 exajoules. By today, it's over 450 exajoules. Energy consumption per capita was around 20 gigajoules. Back 100 years ago, it's 65 gigajoules now, and that's while we've added 4 times the population of 1900. That says nothing to the fact, actually, about the explosion of energy services that have been demanded. So in 1900, we were heating our homes with a fireplace that was at most 20% efficient. Now people in North America and Europe are heating their homes with a natural gas furnace that gets up to 98% efficiency. We used to travel around in state-of-the-art trains that had a combined output of about 1 megawatt. Now we're flying around in 10 megawatt airplanes. So the energy services that we've demanded have increased by more than 20 times as the primary energy supply has done. And for that, we need to turn to energy efficiency to achieve our climate goals. So here's our executive director, the indefatigable Fatih Birol, who says right here that energy efficiency is the most important arrow in the quiver to achieve a sustainable energy system. But, I'm a fan of comic books. With great importance to the climate system comes great responsibility, and it behooves all of us to get the policies right and to actually achieve this energy efficiency potential because we rely on it so much, at least in the IEA scenarios, to get to a 2-degree warming. So how much do we rely on it? Well, here's a depiction of our 2DS scenario that shows indexed to 2012 levels what GDP, energy consumption, and the rate of decarbonization must be. If we take the IMF's word for it, global GDP will triple by 2050. But actually, there's no noticeable rise in total primary energy supply. As you can see here, the reduction in carbon intensity matches that of the reduction in primary energy, which is why I want to say that actual energy efficiency is this unspoken equivalent, or the unspoken lever that we have to get to the 2-degree scenario. Most people talk about renewables. Renewables are obviously incredibly important. But in actuality, we're sort of on track for renewables, at least to 2020. The World Energy Outlook says we need to be up at around 620 gigawatts of capacity of variable renewables by 2020. And the Renewable Energy Market Report for the IEA says, yeah, we're about, based on contracted agreements, about 570 gigawatts there by 2020. So it's somewhat on track. Energy efficiency, well, we'll find out. Just to emphasize that point of renewables and energy efficiency, here's what the total estimated avoided primary energy consumption would be in the 2-degree scenario thanks to energy efficiency. That's this top wedge. It's about 127 exajoules. It's larger than that of primary renewable electricity in 2050. Again, speaking to the fact of the importance of energy efficiency to achieve our 2-degree scenario. So how are we doing? Well, on the surface, not too bad. Unless you're living under a rock, you were intently watching the developments at COP21 last year. There was about 160 INDCs, over 90% of global energy use, 160 countries. Progress is being made, 1.5 degrees. But we've modeled what the cumulative impact of all the INDCs would likely be. And in actuality, they don't even reduce greenhouse gas emissions. They just slow the growth of greenhouse gas emissions. And we all know that actually we can't just slow, we need to ultimately stall and reduce growth. By 2050, it's about 10 billion tons difference between the INDC scenario and the 2-degree warming scenario. So there's a lot of work to be done. The IEA said, well, maybe, the 2-degree scenario is a bit too ambitious. It requires a lot of forward action right now. But we can do a lot of stuff relatively easily, starting now, that is cheap, cost-effective, and that will get us eventually on the trajectory to meet the 2DS after 2030, and that's called the bridge. And as you'll notice there, this is the bridge scenario, and the keystone to the bridge is energy efficiency. So half of the greenhouse gas emissions difference between here and here come from energy efficiency in 2030. It actually grows in importance if we want to get to the 2DS, along with the IEA thinks is a more realistic scenario for deploying energy technologies. What does this really look like? Well, here the IEA is broken down. These are my colleagues on the World Energy Outlook team, but they've broken down the role of energy efficiency and other decarbonization levers by region. And as you see, energy efficiency plays an extremely large role, especially here in Europe. Part of that's due to high end-use prices. Part of that's due to just the potential that's available. When we talk about energy efficiency, what exactly do we mean? Well, we broke it down into 4 big actions: heating and cooling, appliances and lighting, industrial motors, and road transport. And as you see on this bar here, they're about evenly distributed across all of those. So that means we need policy action across all sectors and across all energy end uses. Sidebar, China is almost its whole other planet compared to the world. But as you can see, all regions matter. So there's the goal. We need to get from a 1.6% on average energy intensity improvement to about a 2.6% on average energy intensity improvement after 2020, down to a 3.1, 3.2% energy intensity improvement after 2030. How are we doing on that front? Well, OECD is doing not too bad. We are in line with the targets here. And this is just to say that the real huge energy intensity gains will have to come from non-OECD countries. This will be achievable partly through rapid growth, but also through achieving the potential from that unmet, yet to be satisfied energy service demand. Theoretically, easier to meet, but also there's a lot of policy questions in there on what is the role of OECD vis-a-vis non-OECD to make this happen. Just to note, this is starting in 2020, starting from basically now until 2030, we need to get to 2.6% global energy intensity improvement every year starting now. Not by 2030, every year. What does this mean for energy efficiency? This is getting more to my bailiwick now, which is energy efficiency markets and investments. Well, in a business as usual scenario out to 2030, 2035, we see that there's about $8 trillion in energy efficiency investment. Still significant and sizable, actually, when you compare it to the power system investments. But to achieve the 2-degree scenario, investment almost doubles to 14 trillion cumulatively. Just interesting to note, investments in the rest of the energy sector kind of shift around, they don't grow. It's energy efficiency that grows absolutely. Again, speaking to the role of how energy efficiency is integral to the low carbon energy transition. So, getting a bit on policy, how do we make this happen? The IEA has a number of strategies. I'm going to talk a bit IEA inside ball for you. As I was just showing, there's all the work that we did on the World Energy Outlook, for our scenarios to show the role of energy efficiency. This thing here is all of our stream on energy efficiency in emerging economies that we're ramping up, which is focusing less on stuffy reports and more on training and engagement and actual policy making, the brass tacks, so to speak. And then there's these 2 documents which I work on, which is kind of changing the conversation, changing why we should discuss energy efficiency based on markets and their multiple benefits. I'll just go briefly into those right now. So, energy efficiency market report. We wanted to talk about energy efficiency in kind of more macho terms, more investment and infrastructure. Get the pupils dilating of those finance ministers and energy ministers, like how they do for shovels in the ground infrastructure projects. We said that for energy intensity to be improving, significant amounts of capital was having to be invested on the same order of other energy supply sources. We want to emphasize investment, markets, and importance of efficiency to the energy system broadly. It's backward looking. It's not all these foofy, airy-fairy scenarios that I was just showing you. This is based on real data, stuff that we can observe and monitor over the past 20 years. And of course, as Peter said, it's available free for download. So download as many as you want. Just to get into some high-level findings from the report, this is the nut of a lot of the analysis in the report. It's our decomposition. So, interesting to note, we have a detailed database of IEA countries, over 26 IEA countries, and their energy end use. We can decompose that database into various factors that influence energy demand. As you can see here, the top line is, we said to ourselves, let's build a hypothetical scenario of what if just our population grew and our economy grew, what would that impact be on total energy demand? We would find that energy demand would be about 30% higher than 1990 levels by 2014. But in fact, total final consumption of energy was down since 2004, 2005. What's explaining that? Well, people talk a lot about the role of globalization and structural change and offshoring of industry. We looked at that effect here, which is our structural change. Yes, it's accounting for about over 5% of a reduction in total final consumption. But broadly speaking, energy efficiency is accountable for about 2/3 of the downward pull on total final consumption over the period. On multiple benefits, this is our famous flower on multiple benefits. The multiple benefits book that I just showed you earlier covers these benefits. In the energy efficiency market report, we cover these ones. So quickly, we were saying we can, with the previous decomposition, we can conduct a hypothetical scenario that estimates how much energy efficiency saved over the past 25 years. We can then multiply that energy savings by, say, end-use fuel prices. What we find here is that energy efficiency improvements since 1990 were saving consumers in OECD countries around $500 billion in energy bills and or energy expenditure. That was about $5.7 trillion cumulatively over the period. Just as a note, that's about double as much as the United States federal government spent on its national highway system over the same period. Those energy savings also avoid energy imports. We were able to say, well, how much primary energy demand was being avoided from energy efficiency? And we developed an analysis that estimated the avoided imports from that. We found that in total, about $80 billion was being avoided from energy efficiency in OECD countries by 2014. This actually boosted the trade surplus of Germany by 12% and reduced the trade deficits of Japan and France by 10%. This is having real impacts on national current accounts. Further, we said, what if energy efficiency had not improved, but we still wanted to see the same share of renewable energy production that we have observed in 2014? How much extra variable renewable energy would we need to invest in to maintain the shares that we see now? Does that make sense? So if we didn't have energy efficiency, we theoretically would need more renewable energy generation to compensate for the additional energy demand. Well, as we found for Sweden and Germany, they'd need an extra 5 and 6 gigawatts of variable renewables. If you estimate that it's about $1 billion a gigawatt, and there you go. Energy efficiency is avoiding a significant amount of capital expenditure. And one of the areas that I'm actually very interested in moving forward is the interplay of energy efficiency and renewables. How do they play nicely together, which I think they do very well. Finally, we looked at a bunch of cities. I just finished writing a chapter on cities and energy efficiency. This is going to be another key driver. You can't get more first fuel, or the concept of energy efficiency as a fuel, than Seoul's one less nuclear plan. They basically explicitly say we want energy efficiency to save as much energy as a nuclear reactor, because they're having extreme energy security issues there. So how do you replace? This is the this is on camera. I won't say it. This is a Korean nuclear reactor, or looks like multiple nuclear reactors. It's a nuclear plant. How do you replace one of these? With LED bulbs and other things. Basically, Seoul deployed 2 million LED bulbs in less than 5 years. And actually, they hit the targets early. You know, the idea that efficiency is not this, is something different from raw energy or that real energy infrastructure is just, in my opinion, false. You can actually replace a significant amount of power capacity, for example, with energy efficiency. So I just want to bring it back to greenhouse gas emissions and the developing world. The challenge for us really is really made very plainly here in this chart. Here's what we project Indian economic growth to get from what is that, 2014 to 2030. It's essentially what China did over the past 25 years, for the same kind of distance. Except India has about 7 billion less greenhouse gas emissions to do it as compared to China. In my opinion, this is the model of sustainable development. And this can only be achieved through something like energy efficiency. The question is, how do we make this happen? I don't know, but I don't want to end on a down note. We haven't embarked on an energy efficiency project like this before, but that doesn't mean it's not possible. It's a double negative, I'm sorry. That means it's possible. Why do I think it's possible? Well, 2015, I think the data is just coming in now, but 2015, I think, is the warmest year that it's been in tens of thousands of years. The teeth of the climate system are starting to sink in. We're all starting to feel it. We're all noticing it this winter, especially here, for example, in Europe. You talk around, there's very visible planetary sustainability thresholds that are being taxed. I see that as an opportunity. I think the space for policy engagement and the space for policy innovation and opportunity is going to rapidly expand in light of this. This is an opportunity for experiment, creativity, and innovation. And it will germinate a rethink of the status quo that was recently unthinkable. I haven't offered any policy advice to you today. I have lots of that potentially for the panel. But with that, I will end the presentation and welcome your thoughts and questions. Thank you.